Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2008 film Splinter, and yes, this is one I bought way back when it initially came out. I remember watching it at that time and really enjoying it, and it's been since that first time I watched it for me to watch it again. So it's great to see that, I'm going to tell you, it holds up. It holds up really well. Now, this review is for subscriber Salty Essentials, who I also did another review for The Carrier. So it's kind of funny that there's a bit of like a theme of like infection between these two films. But great pick right here. This is actually one I was going to get to and review at some point. Who knows how long that would have taken. So thank you, Salty Essentials, for making it a pick of yours for this month so that I could bump it up the list, basically, because this is a good one. And I'm excited to talk about it right now. This is definitely a film that should be revisited, especially for people who like films that are kind of like a fresh, interesting take on like a kind of zombie film, because I really do view this as a kind of a zombie film. Anything having to do with like an infection that like moves from creature to creature or person to person and makes them act kind of like in a zombie-ish state, like in this film, I consider it a riff on a zombie film, and this one definitely is, in my opinion. But more interesting. Directed by Toby Wilkins, who also did Devil's Trade, The Grudge 3, did some of the Teen Wolf show on MTV and the show Chosen. Written by Ian Shorr, who also wrote Rigged, Trenches, Office Uprising, Infinite, Always Watching, A Marble Hornets Story. And Kai Berry, who also wrote Yuko's Time Machine and The Operative. I've not seen any of those things. Shea Wiggum, who played Dennis in this film, apparently ad-libbed a good amount of his dialogue. Good job on that. I think he did an excellent job with it. When you find that out, that people like ad-lib lines and it feels like it was scripted, basically, it's impressive to me. So good job on that. Apparently, they actually built onto the gas station that's used in this film. Like, it was an existing gas station, and they built a little extra portion onto it to kind of get everything they needed for the film. So that's just an interesting little tidbit. Getting into the events of the actual film, the initial infected critter attack looks funny, because the critter does look pretty fake. I mean, it just looks like fake fur covered in, like, black ooze, basically. Although, I will say that all the little noises that you start hearing before the attack happens are really cool. They do a really good job with sound design in this film, and one of the things that really helps kind of the sound design stand out, and I've said this with numerous films before, is using long stints of no music. I think they didn't overplay the use of score in this film, and that's something, especially back in 2008, that was happening a lot. It's only been within the past, like, 5 years-ish that I think we've started in horror film to get away from, like, in-your-face, beat-you-over-the-head scores. So to see that there was very little, like, restrained score used in this film was actually really awesome. So I really enjoyed that. The introduction of Seth and Polly is effective at making their relationship feel real and them seeming like nice people who you'd actually root for within the film. It bonds you to them immediately. They're like, these are real people. These are good people. We will root for them. And we do end up rooting for them. Now, standing in contrast, we are introduced to Lacey and Dennis, who are supposed to stand in contrast because they immediately show that their relationship is not nearly as good as the relationship that Seth and Polly have, because they're already arguing a little bit, and it seems like they're up to something. Obviously, we find out that's because, he's on the run for killing someone, basically. He'd been into a life of crime with her. She's a drug addict, all that stuff. So they literally set these two couples up as mirror or opposites of each other. It's a 180, it's Seth and Polly, and it's a 180, it is Lacey and Dennis. And that's intentional, obviously. Once the carjacking actually starts, they'll end up stopping at the gas station and get stuck there. But the big question remains, how are they going to work together or not work together once they're placed in danger? So you really do know basically where the film's headed as far as them getting to the gas station eventually, being holed up there, having to deal with the splinters, which I'll just, it's a film called Splinter, so I'll just call the thing Splinters, basically, which look great, by the way. Like, the effects in this are really good. Love the practical effects used. The limited CGI, if there was any, I couldn't even really tell it was CGI, so it may have been all practical effects, or it may have been practical effects with a little CGI mixed in, and it was done sparingly enough and well enough that I couldn't tell the difference, basically. So it looks good. It's great. It's great. Sorry, I can't tell what I wrote here, unfortunately. The whole aspect of the infected dog they hit being Lacey's pet Ginger is actually kind of ridiculous. I don't like that little bit. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense. The only thing I can tell is that it was a way to get the character of Lacey closer to the creature, to like get her in more danger, when some people might just be like, oh, whatever. We hit something, let's keep moving. But I don't know, it just played as kind of weird, and it was kind of like, what are the odds that, like, that's her actual pet that they end up hitting with the car? Like, that's a small thing within this film, but it's something I did not like from the aspect of the story. As soon as you see the splinters growing, you get an idea what the evil's actually going to be. It also looks really good, like I already said. So you're like, okay, as an audience member, I now know we need to be looking out for these black splinters. Like, that's the thing, the big bad thing in the film. The introduction of Lacey's drug addiction made me wonder if it would actually end up being important within the story. It's not. I think it's just something that's thrown in there just to be like, she's a bad person, but, it's used that way in film, especially in the past, as like, if you do drugs, you're just a bad person. Obviously, it's an addiction situation, and I think we've seen a lot of films that have come out since that have kind of dealt with addiction as a problem. It's not, you're inherently a bad person because you have an addiction problem. So, this is just kind of older. You need to remember that this was how things were thought of, basically, not that long ago, unfortunately. The gas station attendant looks real good and gnarly when he ends up being found in the bathroom of the gas station. Sorry, I just spit there. They don't focus on it too much, though, and that's one of the big things. Like, the practical effects look good enough, but they also don't focus on them too closely. So you can tell they were probably not too confident in how it looked to, like, show long, extended shots. Because if you think about it, a lot of them, they'll kind of use, like, quicker cuts. They also use very shaky camera work, so they're not showing it a lot. But what they do show looks good. Seth and Polly easily could have locked Dennis outside of the gas station when he goes for Lacey because he thinks she's still alive. Because at that point, it was really like, even if he starts shooting, which is what Seth was concerned about, they could hide in the back. They could hide in the fridge. Like, they use the fridge later, like, that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I really do feel like in that situation, Seth and Polly both would have been on the same page of just lock this dude out and he can deal with it. Because at this point, they owe him nothing. I think Seth, though, is too much of, like, a good-hearted person to let that go. Because obviously Polly did lock him out, and then Seth goes and unlocks it because he's like, no, this isn't the right thing to do. He's just viewing a human life as a human life, basically. Which gives you the idea that since he's, like, a science-y guy, he's kind of adhering to, like, the doctor's code of ethics of the, like, a life is a life and you save a life, in essence. So, yeah. So there's that difference between Polly and Seth. He's just more sensitive. She's more rough and rugged. By the way, I think Polly's the only character who does not change at all in this film. Because Seth obviously changes from being more of like a, I don't want to say useless person, but in the eyes of Dennis, he's seen as like very soft and ineffective as a man. Like, he can't change a tire, stuff like that. And then he's, like, helping to, like, save everyone's lives by the end of the film. And then Dennis obviously starts out as, like, this criminal who's doing terrible things. And then he redeems himself at the end of the film. Polly stayed static the entire time. Like, she was effective from the beginning with, like, changing the tire and, like, I can do stuff. And then she just stays that way throughout the entire film. So, I just think it was interesting to point that out. And then Lacey, obviously, it changes a lot in a different way. Lacey's 3 severed fingers that turns into, like, the Splinter creature looks awesome. That's my favorite effect of the film. It's probably everyone's favorite effect in the film. That, like, little, like, finger. I think it's, like, these 3 fingers, basically. Like, thumb and these 2 fingers. And it, like, walks around and stuff with all the black around it and the splinters coming out. It looks totally cool. You can tell they did it like an actual puppet, which is super effective, way better than using CGI, especially in 2008. CGI wasn't that hot. Yeah. And the problem is, like, as time goes on, all CGI that came before whatever year you're in doesn't look that great. Yeah, and that's kind of like the issue with CGI versus practical effects. But love the fingers creature. Seth's explanation of how the splinters feed and that they're like mold is really interesting. That's the first thing that really piques my interest about this creature and or about the splinters and trying to understand what these splinters actually are. And it's great that they keep dropping these little bits of knowledge that they discover about the splinters. That's one of the things that I think helps keep the pacing good with this film. And there is really good pacing with it. So I really like that aspect. With Lacey's body trying to get in, you assume it's because the splinters can smell or sense the blood as their food that's, inside of the gas station because it's going after the people. But then, I mean, that was my initial assumption, that it could, like, smell or sense blood. But then you find out it was actually working based off of heat, which is why it ended up, like, running for the car at that one point. And that's obviously something that Seth comes up because he is the science-y guy. Real quick pause for horror hydration. Thanks for bearing with me. Next point. As soon as a state trooper shows up, you know that she's going to end up dead. She's just there to increase the body count for the most part. And she dies in pretty good gory fashion, in my opinion. She gets ripped in half in a pretty good practical effects scene. I also like the scene that comes not long after that where the splinters, like the black stuff, is like coming out of the body parts and like fusing the top half of the state trooper to another body. I don't know. I don't remember if it was like Lacey's body or if it was the initial gas station attendant's body, but it was really cool that it was just kind of like whatever was body parts were nearby. It was just like fusing to creating this like zombie Frankenstein thing that was pretty cool. The scene. Oh, I literally just said that. The amount of problem solving that goes on with Dennis, Polly, and Seth keeps things moving and interesting. I kind of already talked about that, but it's not only that it's interesting, it's that you're seeing that these characters aren't stupid. Like, they feel a little more real life. They feel more intelligent than a lot of horror films you end up seeing, where people just make dumb decisions, or they're not really problem solving that much. So it's just really cool to see all three of the characters pitching in and problem solving and bouncing ideas off each other throughout the film. It feels way more real for that reason. You kind of forget that Dennis is infected until the scene where his finger ends up like breaking backwards, which is a crazy kind of like shocking moment because, like I said, like at least I did, like I had forgotten at that point that he was infected. Like we knew earlier because he gets pricked by it and you're like, ooh, I have a feeling that's going to come into play later. And then you see a little bit later that like he looks at his finger, it's causing him a little pain and it's got like these black marks on his finger and you're like, yeah, this isn't going to be good. It's like being bitten by a zombie. It's going to surface at some point and you're going to start turning. Obviously that does happen. But that scene is kind of jarring where it just like snaps back. But he hides it. He's that person at that point still. He's hiding it. It's great when the three fingers sprout some extra little appendages, basically. It starts like regrowing stuff, which is really, really cool. And then it's coming after Polly and Seth. And they kind of like get that basket, that like grate, and put it up. And it's like trying to get through there. I don't know if it could have like jumped at some point, but it could have like backed up and jumped. But you get the idea. It's not like intelligent. You know, because they even describe it as, you know, being like mold. Mold's not intelligent. It just goes after food source. Like, it just grows like that. It just keeps growing along whatever food source path it has. So, makes sense. Dennis's arm snapping is painful to watch. When they're in the cooler and it starts, like, going up his arm and his arm, like, just snaps back. That was hard to watch. Even harder to watch is the part where he gets his arm cut off with a box cutter, which, man, to do it that way is rough. And then even further, the fact that they had to finish it off with a cinder block. That was like, I let out an actual noise during that scene. I was like, oof. Like, when he just throws that cinder block down and completes the severing of that arm, it's like, ooh, man, oh man. And good sound design on that. The crunch really helped. Seth's sciencing hits its peak when he comes up with the idea to drop his body temperature to end up getting to the state trooper's car. Again, smart, cool idea, coming from the science guy, obviously. It was cool. It was innovative. It was interesting. Like that idea. Dennis gets his redemption moment in the end when he stays behind to occupy the creature while Polly and Seth end up running. This is when he turns. I mean, he had been kind of turning. I think the biggest indicator moment is the one where he's admitting to Seth when they're in the cooler that, like, he was effective at something and, you know, like, thanking him in essence, and then they're kind of, like, sharing the beer together. At that point, it feels like they're actually, like, bonding as, like, survivors together, as, like, people who have come to actually like each other at that point. Because, obviously, prior, they were very much adversaries. And they do go through the slow progression of starting to come closer to one another and bonding eventually. And then by the end, obviously, you know, Seth and Polly are very concerned and upset with what's going on with Dennis because they have become close to him, even though they put him in this situation, or he put them in this situation, in essence. The reveal of Dennis's dog tags in the end is supposed to show that at one point in his life he was a hero. Then he lost his way, he got into crime and all that stuff, and he finishes this film by becoming a hero again. So he's going back to who he was. It comes full circle. Through this experience, through this combat experience, basically, he becomes a hero once again. And that is a good moment. Because it's then taking this person and kind of showing you, like, yeah, he did bad things, but he's not all a bad person. Although he did murder someone, so you can't totally forgive that. Gotta love the twitch of the splinters at the very, very end of the film where they show, you know, the viscera that's still there with all the black stuff on it and splinters sticking up, and then they focus on it and they're just like, shh. It's like, yeah, okay. Would like a sequel. Don't think a sequel ever happened. Kind of sad because this film was really good, but yeah. There's good use of long stints with no music. I already said that. Love that. There are a few moments. It's mainly early in the film, and then it starts, like, settling down a lot more, but there were some really aggressive cuts. It was like a lot of quick cuts going on very aggressively. Kind of almost gives you whiplash. But like I said, it's mainly just in the beginning portion of the film, and then it starts to, like, settle down. It's kind of like the filmmaker was a little unsure of what they were trying to do, and they just wanted it to be too frantic, and it was just way too much. And then they kind of figure out as it goes on, okay, maybe we should settle this down some. But a little rough in the beginning. The gas station setting, I think, is perfect for kind of like that hopeless, isolated feeling, because you get the idea it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It's a very small building, so there's not a lot you can do once you're trapped inside of it, and you just get the idea that there's no help. There's nothing around. Like, you just see there's, like, woods, basically, and a road and darkness because it's at night. So very effective. Already said it. This is basically a zombie film, just a different twist. Seth and Polly in this represent urban people, and Dennis and Lacey end up representing rural people. That's just another thing in showing the dichotomy of the two couples. This is done in film quite a bit to kind of like show. It's usually stereotypes where it's kind of like, these are the urban people. They are educated. The man is very sensitive. These are the rural people. They are not very educated. They are low-life criminals. And that is a stereotype that has shown up in film quite a bit that is not good. It's not helpful at all, because when you keep showing that, like, some people will start to believe that, like, that's how people are who are from rural settings. And they do that with Dennis and Lacey, but they also do that with Seth, where, you know, oh, he's this, you know, too effeminate man, according to a more macho person in Dennis. He can't even do anything for himself. He's totally useless because he's been so urbanized. He's such an urban male that he can't do anything for himself. And that's a stupid stereotype. And then you have the stupid stereotype of Dennis, who's just this low-life scumbag. And the same thing with Lacey, who's a low-life drug addict. You know, it's just... with Lacey, she gets no redemption, but it is good because you see the change and the redemption in Seth and Dennis. But I think watching this film now and how far we've come with a lot of film, it just reminds you that these were stereotypes that we had in film, and you still have them in some films, and they're not good. They're really not good. People are more complicated than that, and boiling people down to a few stereotypes is never great. It never is. But yeah. This is one of many films portraying rural people as low-life drug-addicted criminals. Yeah, I already said that, but it's just, yeah, kind of makes you shake your head. It also uses the commonly used stereotype of the urban man being soft and ineffective. Yeah, just to reiterate. Anyway, yeah, enjoyed this film quite a bit. Again, thank you, Salty Essentials. Out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm giving it a very solid 3.5-star rating. I think if this is a film that people should definitely be watching if they didn't see it. I do think this is a very underrated film that a lot of people have probably not seen. A lot of people have probably not seen, but would really enjoy. Really, really enjoy. So go out there, tell friends about it who are into horror. I think this is a gem. I think we need to resurrect popularity of this film. Well, not that it was even popular that much in the first place, but let's make it popular. Come on, everyone. Would love to hear your opinions on this film. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Whatever you think, good, bad, in between. And just give me like a sentence or two why you feel that way. Also, do me a favor and hit subscribe to my channel because that would be very much appreciated. It really helps me out trying to grow this nerdy horror community here and, get more cool people to comment and talk nerdy about horror because that's what I love doing. Also, hit the notification bell button because then you'll know whenever my videos are going up, which I'm doing at least 4 a week at this point, which is a good amount of work in my opinion. But regardless, thank you for taking your time to watch this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.